You're really going to say
Well, good evening, everybody. This is Kelli Stewart, and I'm going to try to give a recap of today's trial. I've got a notepad that is almost completely full of notes, and so I want to give an overview, which is kind of more my style, but then I also want to go through and read some of the more specific points of the things that happened today. Monday, July 30th is today, and we are down here in Portland, Oregon. There's a group of us that came down. Great group of people showed up today. It was really awesome to have people come in from out of town and make today a priority. So thank you to those who came. We didn't take any pictures or stand out at a Patriot Corner. Everybody's focus was really being on in that courtroom today and making sure we got a seat. The courtroom was packed, which was great to see. So like I was saying, I'm going to do a quick overview here, and then in trying to keep up with the amazing Andrea Parker, I'm going to try to read some notes. I took notes all day long. I don't even know, 100 pages of notes here. But my quick overview is that there will not be a conviction of Agent Astarita, not because I believe he is innocent, but because I believe that reasonable doubt has been presented on multiple occasions. At this point, we have the lead agent BM. We don't get to know his name. He gets to be secretive. But we have the lead agent BM, who has stated that it's not likely, the FBI agent, that it's not likely, but it is possible that he fired the shots. Today, we actually learned from Officer 1 that it is possible that he also fired the shots. Now, he did say at different points, he talked from both sides of his mouth, and he stated from different points that it is not possible that he fired. But then the reasons that he believes he did not fire those shots are where the defense kind of broke down, because the reasons fell on, well, the bullets weren't missing from my chamber, but his gun wasn't actually secured. He left it overnight at the scene of the ambush in an unlocked vehicle, and so there's some discrepancies there. And in the end, he himself concluded that he had to give heavy consideration to the fact, as soon as he learned about these extra shots 4 and 5, he had to give extra deep, heavy thought to try to consider whether or not he was the one who fired those shots. So a quick overview. I do not believe we will see a conviction in this. Even if there was, I'm not sure that it would be justice because of all the reasonable doubt that has been presented. I do believe Astarita to be guilty, but I have a part of me, maybe 25%, that I really could see it being Officer 1. Officer 1 is the one who assassinated Lavoy Finicum along with Officer 2. Officer 1 was in Burns as the lead of the SWAT team for the time of the occupation. He is with Oregon State Police, and he is the one who was communicating with Officer 2. Officer 2 was coming into the scene of the ambush. Officer 1 was already on the scene, and Officer 2 radioed to Officer 1. There's discrepancies on what was said. One side is saying that they said it looks like we're going to have to kill Lavoy Finicum. The other side is saying Lavoy Finicum said we're going to have to kill him. But either way you slice it, the two who were discussing this ended up being the assassins of Lavoy Finicum, shooting him 3 times in the back. And so when I look at what Officer 1 did, Officer 1 fired 3 shots into the grill of 2 shots at the grill. 1 shot hit the rear view mirror, the side mirror, when Lavoy was approaching the roadblock. Then Officer 1 says he did not fire the next 2 shots that went to the roof, and we'll talk a little bit more in a minute why it's important. Why are shots 4 and 5 such a big deal? And we'll kind of talk through that in just a minute, why everybody's kind of doing the, it wasn't me, I didn't do shots 4 and 5. And then he ultimately did the shots that led to the murder of Lavoy Finicum. And so, there is, I believe that there is some great possibility that Officer 1 fired at the grill, fired at the roof of the car, and then took out Lavoy. But based on location, it could have also been Astarita who did it. Astarita, sitting in the courtroom, in my opinion, looks guilty as hell. And at the end of the day, it's pretty sad that we're even in this position where we have all these elite agents that, we can't trust any of their testimonies in the end because there's discrepancies all over the place. So let's see if there's any other things, full gallery, Officer 1 when he started out, and then proceeded throughout most of the day to be very nervous, breathing very heavy. He had about an hour today before lunch where he was really calm until the prosecution got a hold, I'm sorry, the defense got a hold of him. And then he became very flustered. There was a lot of inconsistencies that came out. Judge Jones, I'm going to say this as a citizen journalist and as a spectator. Judge Jones, I think I can speak freely. I think I'm in America still and I can speak freely. He looks like, now I'm actually thinking before I speak, that's not normal for me. Judge Jones is white as a ghost. He is thin, he is pale, he fell asleep. I counted more than 10 times today that Judge Jones fell asleep today in the trial. He is irritable, he is grouchy. I gotta say, I like him. On a personal level, he's kind of funny and you know, gets kind of crotchety and ticked off at times at both sides of the courtroom. But overall, it's almost a little bit of a shame that he's sitting up there. It is a shame because I feel like, one more commentary piece, that this is a mock trial. I don't feel like anybody's fighting on either side. Nobody stands up to address the witness. Everybody's sitting at their tables. You have a whole panel for the prosecution. You have a whole panel for the defense. And I don't really feel like there's a fight in this like I have felt in the previous 5 trials between the 2 in Oregon and the 3 in Nevada. And it was really disappointing to me. I actually left court about 20 minutes early because I felt like I am wasting my time. This is a scripted courtroom. They already know what they're going to say. They already know what they're going to decide. There aren't any objections. I heard 2 objections the entire day, and they were pathetic objections that didn't matter if they objected or not. And in fact, one objection was for leading, and Judge Jones said, that's not leading, and it absolutely was leading, but it wasn't a big deal. And I think Judge Jones had been asleep, so he didn't hear what the statement was. But at any rate, it's pretty ironic to sit in this courtroom where we watched people being silenced, nobody being able to give their testimonies, no witnesses being able to be called in these trials. And I'm telling you guys what, this is literally like sitting in on a family reunion. Like both sides are just sitting there talking freely, and the defendant on the stand, or the witness on the stand, will go on and talking, and then the other side will ask questions, and then that side, and then maybe this side will ask questions in the middle of that side, and hey, that's okay, we can all clarify and question him at the same time. To me, it really feels like a family meeting. It does not feel like a trial. And so that has been really disappointing. But back to Judge Jones, that Judge Jones literally looks, he has no color, and then you look at the person on the witness stand and the bright cheeks, and then there's this little frail man. He's 91 years old, you guys, 91. If that isn't just kind of further, I don't know, salt in the wound on the fact that this is just a mock trial, when you have your judge falling asleep for it. He got up at one point. We were waiting for the jury to leave. We all stood up, and the jury stood up to leave, and Judge Jones just walked out the back door. And he's very respectful of the jury when they come in. It's all, you know, all stand, all rise. And it was like he just didn't even think about anything. Maybe he had to use the bathroom or he needed more coffee. I'm not sure, because he just walked out the back door with the jury standing there in the courtroom. It's been pretty crazy, actually, because this is going to be over $1 million trial, and we're paying for that in our tax dollars. So let's see. So I'll tell you guys 2 more important things, and then I'm just going to read through the notes, and that way whoever doesn't want to hang with that doesn't have to. There were new videos that were shown, and I deleted the video earlier because we were all over the place, and I don't know, I didn't actually give you guys any information that was worth keeping on there. But there was a new video that was presented earlier that was a dash cam. It was absolutely from a vehicle. It was showing the arrest of Ryan Bundy and Shauna Cox. They were kneeling down on the ground, and I'm not really sure why they introduced it. They were trying to point out where Astarita was to Officer 1 when Officer 1 was on the stand. Officer 1 is the assassin. But it was frustrating. It angered me a little bit to see this footage, because none of it was entered in as evidence to the first 2 trials, the first and second trial in Oregon. And it was clear as day. And you know, if somebody, because OSP was told by the FBI to turn off all cameras. And so somebody turned on a camera for a time being, and it just feels very deceptive that now they're pulling these cameras, these angles out and showing down on the ground. You watch Shauna being handcuffed. She's kneeling down on the ground. Ryan Bundy's on the ground. He has his cowboy hat on. He's handcuffed. And so clearly head cams were rolling during this ambush. And, I think if they all were honest, they would give us all of the cameras that were running. But see, if they gave us all the cameras that were running, there'd be no room for reasonable doubt. We would know who fired the shots. We would know that Lavoie wasn't reaching for a gun. We would know that even if he was only reaching after he'd already been fired at, after he exited his vehicle, which I don't know if you consider that self-defense or not, but somebody starts firing at you when you jump out of a vehicle. You might, by nature, try to reach for something. One other thing that was a big deal, when Officer 1 went back to Deschutes Sheriff's Department and they were debriefing him there, and he turned in all of his bullets except for the gun, the AR-15. The AR-15, it wasn't called an assault rifle, you guys. It wasn't called an assault rifle today in trial. It was called by its name, which is an AR-15. I kept catching that. He turned in his gun and his bullets minus the AR-15 that he used to kill Lavoie. That he left abandoned at the site in a vehicle for some reason. We're not quite sure why Officer 1 did that. But at any rate, when they took him back to the police department and they photographed every different angle of his vest and his guns and everything he had, they took a full body picture of him. Actually, I think 3 full body pictures of him. They put a bag over his head. They had a bag over his head. And the jury saw this. And they asked him, why did you have a bag over your head? And he said, because we were getting so many threats from the militia that we thought that there should be no photographs. This was a photograph taken by the police department. He said there should be no photographs of my face. So they put a bag in front of his face. Okay, the only people who fired their weapons and ambushed somebody was the Oregon State Patrol, active military, and the FBI. And yet they're going to put bags over their heads to cover their faces when they're taking pictures that are supposed to be used as future evidence to say this was me on the day of the shooting, and yet their faces are concealed, and this is in police evidence. This is such a mock trial, and this is such a joke, the way that we protect the elite and that we feed our fellow civilians to the wolves. We put out all their information and let people go and do all these searches, and here this agent had a bag over his head. And my statement would be, Ammon and Lavoie and Ryan never put bags over their heads. And they even took the witness stand. Ryan defended himself. Ammon took the witness stand because they had nothing to hide. And, it just goes to show who the guilty party really was, because the guilty party is the one who is going to be hiding. No, he wasn't wearing a white hood, Gina. But the guilty party is always trying to conceal their identity. And Ammon Bundy said that the wonderful thing about the truth is it's so easy to tell, and that sunlight is the best disinfectant. And that's why he spent 4 hours on the witness stand telling what he was doing there, while these agents went back to their little hideouts and put bags over their heads for photos. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of just go through some of my notes here. And I'm going to try to, I'll probably skip a bunch of pages. So again, I said this earlier, but the prosecution started saying, just to clarify, this witness will not be sketched to the judge. And the judge says, well, we'll see if he qualifies to start, because Judge Jones forgot that the witness was also the assassin who was on the stand on Friday. And I just had to chuckle at that, because I just thought, this man should be at home playing with his great-grandbabies. He should not be sitting in a courtroom sleeping half the day. Thank goodness he didn't ever snore, but I was bracing myself when he would catch his head and lift it up for a snort to come out. And I thought, what are we supposed to do if he snorts? Can we laugh, or will they throw us out of court? if we laugh. You know, I mean, this is a trial against an FBI agent who lied about firing his shots at a civilian and then allegedly cleaned up the casings. And here we have a judge who's literally falling asleep. Officer 1. Were you positioned with Astarita? Yes, he was over there in the general vicinity as Astarita. Were you in radio communication? Yes, we were in communication with the others. What did you do when Finicum approached? I exited my vehicle. He moved to the outer side. He said the left. It would have been Lavoie's far right. At this point, he was breathing heavy. He was nervous. I noted that his hands were shaking. What did you plan when the vehicle approached? A felony-style traffic stop. Give commands, execute an arrest. Okay, this is what he was planning on doing. What did you observe as the vehicle approached? No variation in speed. There was multiple testimonies today, and they were all different about the speed of the vehicle and what Lavoie was doing when he fell in the snow and whatnot. No variation in speed, constant speed as he approached me. What did you do? I then made the choice to fire at the vehicle to slow down the truck and save the other officers at the stop. So somehow in Officer 1's longevity of being a SWAT officer forever with Oregon State Patrol, he thought that if a vehicle is going 80 miles an hour and it's coming right for you, 80 is the speed they estimated from other testimonies, it's best if you shoot at the vehicle and you try to kill the driver. Somehow, that is going to protect everybody at the scene. Now, we'll note later in Agent Pollard's testimony, he was the man with the taser in the tree line. He actually was over by the vehicles until he saw Lavoie's vehicle, and then what he did was ingenious. He got out of the way, and he moved to the tree line before the vehicle got there. He didn't have to shoot anybody, he didn't have to kill anybody, he didn't have to get run over, he didn't have to risk getting run over. He moved completely out of the way, unlike our agent who actually jumped in front of Lavoie's truck, which once it slowed down to the slowest motion you can see, Lavoie was already veering over the snow long before Agent Neidert. Agent Neidert is who jumped in front of the vehicle. He jumped in front of the vehicle when Lavoie was already heading into the snow. I mean, we're not dealing with the sharpest knives in the drawer here. How many shots were fired? I noted this. How many shots did you fire at the grill of the vehicle? Multiple shots, more than one. At this point in the testimony, he does not know how many shots he fired at the vehicle. He does not know who is in the vehicle. He cannot identify anybody in the vehicle. He could not even at this point identify Lavoie Finicum. So when he shot the 3 first shots at the front of the vehicle as Lavoie approached the roadblock, he could see nobody. For all he knew, he was going to shoot Victoria Sharp in the head. This is called third world justice. When a vehicle that is fleeing a scene in fear for its life, where you can open fire with 18-year-old girls, with women, with men who are not returning fire, and you could potentially shoot them in the face, and it will turn out to be justified, because those 3 shots he fired were considered justified. There was no wrongdoing in the 3 shots by the government. Okay, so video of the shots. We hear that there's 3 shots that were fired. Let's see, he says he did take those shots. He hit the grill as the truck approached. He was behind from the right. Then we do a bunch of drawings to figure out exactly where he is. He moves quickly to give aid to the officer that he believes has been hit. He did not actually get hit, but he thinks he's going to Neidert, who he thinks got hit. At any point when you cross the road, did you fire your weapon? Okay, so this is when the alleged shots were fired at the roof. So there was a threat, apparently, when Lavoie was approaching the roadblock. Even though he couldn't see the roadblock, and when he did, he swerved out of the way. Apparently, if a vehicle's coming towards you, you can try to kill the person based on what their testimony is, and it's justified. And then when they're out in the snow and you're giving them orders and they don't listen, you can shoot them 3 times in the back. However, shots 4 and 5 happened when Lavoie first jumped out of the vehicle with his hands in the air, and no commands had been given at this point from these officers. And so Officer 1, who we don't get to know his name because these are called secret courts, he testified later that he was afraid when he learned of the shots to the roof of the car. He was afraid of a lawsuit. He said he was afraid, and I'll quote him later, but he was afraid that he'd have to stop in the line of work that he was doing because he said if he fired shots at Lavoie as he exited the truck and into the roof of the truck and didn't even know it, he would have to severely consider the line of work that he was in. At any point as you cross the road, so he's going from basically like over on the right side of the road, if we're watching Lavoie enter, Officer 1 was to the right, he crosses the road to go towards the snowbank. And he says at this point, so at this point he's crossing Agent BM. I just have to think of bowel movement every time. I can't believe he didn't choose a better name than Agent BM. I know those are his initials, but I mean, come on. So Supervisor Agent BM and Astarita were in the center, and he's crossing them. So this is the defense and the prosecution are both kind of debating back and forth at the second that Officer 1 crosses the middle of the road right in front of his vehicle, and there's Agent BM and Astarita who fired those shots. And quite frankly, it could have been any of the three of them, and all three of them are admitting it could have. Early on in the testimony, he says, "No, I did not." "Are you certain of that?" And he says, "Yes, I am." Remember, this is the prosecution, and he is testifying essentially for the prosecution, so it's reversed from our Bundy trials, where the prosecution is for him, the defense is kind of against him. He says, "Do you see the officer with less lethal weapon, the taser? I recall being the only one on the scene to provide containment and cover for Trooper Pollard." He notices Trooper Pollard over in the tree line, and he really felt, and Trooper Pollard testified to this later too, that it was his job to come in behind and shoot Lavoie because he thought he was reaching for a weapon, and Officer Pollard, who was in the tree line, he says had less lethal force. We later learned with Officer Pollard's testimony. Sorry, I lost it for a second. That was not completely true because Officer Pollard actually had his pistol in his hand pointed at Lavoie. He just didn't have his assault rifle. Whoops, I mean his AR-15 is what they call him. He just didn't have an AR-15. But Officer Pollard in the tree line, who had the long taser on his arm, he had it with his left arm, he extended it out. He did have a pistol in his hand, he put that away, and then he pulled out the taser when he saw Officer 1 approach, and he knew that Officer 1 had an assault rifle, an AR-15, pointed at Lavoie, and he felt like it was safe now to go ahead and pull out the taser. Okay, so now they go back and forth for what felt like forever discussing who is where in the video. Put a dot on yourself. Is this you? Is this you? Is this still you? If we show you another clip, will it still be you? If I show you this clip, is that still you? They're going back and forth. Were you giving commands? He says no at this time. Was Trooper Pollard? Yes. Was Lavoie Finicum, Mr. Finicum, complying with commands? No. Who was in the trees? Trooper Pollard. Back and forth frames with all the videos, blurry, hard to tell. I mean, it's just an absolute joke, you guys. I mean, the fact that we had Bretzing's co-employee or co-worker say to him, "Are you sure you want to record this?" You know, there was so much premeditated murder in this whole setup that the video footage we have in the day and age we have alone should be causing like riots in the street because it is the crappiest film. And then we do see that dash cam footage on the ground, black and white, beautiful, totally clear as day. You can see Sean, you can see Ryan. And then I note here, jury seems bored. Jones keeps falling asleep. Astarita looks gray, worn out, very stressed. He has very high cheekbones, sucked in eyes. Astarita's over at a table with 2 other women and 3 men. That man is stocked up on defense attorneys. So then I went ahead and I don't know, let's see. It doesn't matter. I was going to show you a drawing, which I can go ahead and post some pictures of some drawings so you can see where people were at. It sounds to me like the only casing that was seen originally was the one that was in the street. That was a 308 casing that was fired by Officer 2. Jury's gone. It's 9:45. At this point, I had noted 6 times that Judge Jones had fallen asleep. And it's 9:45, guys. We started court at 9 o'clock. So yeah, this is a mock trial. Jury's gone. They do color-coded officers. They ask over and over, is the yellow you, is the orange you, is the blue you, is the green you, who's who? Finally, Judge Jones is getting annoyed, and Jones says, just play the video. If he confirms that he remains orange for the whole clip, then he's orange. And I thought that was funny because it should be a no-brainer, and I appreciated his age in that point because the other attorney, or the other judges, Brown and Navarro, would just let him go through clip after clip after clip. It was the same thing that, like, they literally moved this way. Is that still you? Yes, that's still me. So I did appreciate his grouchy 91-year-old testiness. Okay, he continues anyway and keeps asking the questions about the color coding, even though Judge Jones gets mad at him. 10 a.m. 10 a.m. Jones says, "Is it time for a coffee break?" So they finished debating. Jury's still gone. We've been in there an hour now, and Judge Jones is saying, "Is it time for a coffee break? Where are you going next?" And the prosecution tries to say he was testifying where he was. And Jones says, "I know where we've been. I want to know where you headed." And he was just so grouchy. And then no break yet. Judge Jones changes his mind. Jury returns. Do you have a clear video at this point? When the shots hit the roof, do you see Finicum? And at this point, Officer 1 says no, he does not see Finicum at this point. Finicum's up by the door when the shots are fired, and Officer 1 is saying he doesn't see him. What did you do as you cleared the road? I don't recall seeing any movement from Lavoie at that point. Mr. Finicum, he was behind the vehicle. I saw the officer on the ground. Now he knows that the officer, Neidert, actually didn't get hit, which that man has got to learn that you don't jump in front of a moving vehicle, especially when it's swerving your direction. You jump the other direction. That could be something they introduce into some training in the future. Let's see. Then Officer 1 says he does remember being startled by a loud noise to his right, which is right where Officer BM and Astarita were at. Did you fear for your safety? Did you know the occupants were armed and dangerous? They might have even been armed with assault rifles. Oh no, wait, now we're calling those AR-15s. They're not scary anymore because all the police have them. And he says, yes, I knew those were armed and dangerous militants. Keep in mind, guys, backstory, Officer 1 was the lead SWAT in Burns. Did you interact with the driver at all? Yes, I did. He appeared to have, let's see, yes, I did. He appeared to have, Officer 1 at this point says that Lavoie appeared to have anger in his statements. You know, I don't know why. Everybody's pointing guns at you, about to kill you. And it says he had anger in his statements. He was moving. He was putting his hands towards his torso multiple times. Did you recognize him as Lavoie Finicum, one of the occupiers of the armed takeover? Yes, I did. What did you see him do? He says he saw him reach, not once, not twice, 3 times towards his torso, where I knew he carried a pistol, and I felt he would use it on myself and Pollard. Were you concerned for your safety? Yes, Officer 1 says. Oregon State Patrol, he was in fear for his safety as he held his AR-15 with 2 magazines with 29 bullets in each one at Lavoie Finicum. Were you concerned for the safety of the others, of the other officers, all the other officers that had the tasers and the assault rifles? Whoops, I mean the AR-15s is what they call them now. Yes, he said, I had to use lethal force to protect myself and Pollard. I fired 2 rounds with my AR-15 rifle, aka assault rifle, but he didn't call it that. It's still an assault rifle, an AR-15 rifle. And I'll keep saying that through this conversation because it was sick to hear them over and over bragging about their guns, how many shots they fired, how they load their weapons. I just sat through, you know, a variation of 5 trials where every bullet was a potential bullet that could have killed an FBI agent, a bullet that could have killed an officer, and now we have agents saying, you know, oh yeah, I had 29 in each clip, I had this in the backup, I had this on my vest, yeah, no big deal. All of a sudden, those bullets and those assault rifles, I mean AR-15s, become safe when they're actually the ones who killed Lavoie and fired at the car with an 18-year-old girl in it. I don't know about you, but and hit the passenger in the shoulder. I don't know about you, but if I took off everybody's uniforms and we made all the occupiers and all the FBI and all the Oregon State Patrol stand out in the snow naked, okay? Make them all naked for just a minute. I don't know about you, but I'd be terrified of everybody who was outside of Lavoie's vehicle, okay? Put me in a foreign area, I don't know anybody, I would be terrified, but apparently it's okay now. He says at this point, I then fired 2 rounds, striking Mr. Finicum twice in the back. Where were his hands? His hands were in his jacket. Then he draws a path to where he went across the road before he shot him. Is that the path you took to keep the driver from fleeing the scene? Okay. Fleeing the scene. He said he took that path because he wanted to get to Lavoie to keep him from fleeing the scene, because really out in the middle of nowhere he was going to flee the scene in 4 feet of snow. Mark where you were when you, let's see, when you heard the event to the right of you that startled you. He marks it at that point. He's standing right next to BM and Astarita. Again, remember that BM testified on Friday that it could have been him. And so that it's not likely, but it could have been. So, you know, when he says he heard a sound to the right of him, well, there's multiple officers there who could have done it. So again, there's so much reasonable doubt in this case. I think they knew all along they were never going to get a conviction, and this was just a mock trial. Okay, addressing the scene. What were you guys doing? We deployed diversions. We yelled commands. I was looking on how to conduct the arrest of the others. Describe Astarita. Astarita was yelling louder and faster to the point where I looked at him. How did you take them into custody? We deployed gas, non-lethal rounds, and then they finally exited the truck. Gee, again, I don't know about you, but why did they not exit the truck? Was the truck moving? No. Did anyone complain of injuries? Yes, Ryan Bundy did. Shauna and Ryan were being arrested. They showed that footage, never before seen footage. All of a sudden came out of nowhere. Let's see, it was a vehicle cam, totally clear. Were you the supervisor? Yes, I was in command of all personnel on the scene. This is Oregon State Patrol, Trooper 1. What did you do to preserve the scene? I looked for witnesses. I organized an ambulance, satellite. I used the satellite phone to contact the command post. I looked for someone to be with officer number 2 who also fired shots. I noted that because they have satellite phones. Isn't that nice when you get ambushed in the middle of nowhere and you can't call for help? But don't worry, because your assassin has a satellite phone, so he can call for backup. And then he'll leave you in the snow while he waits for the ambulance to come. And he can also call to the command point, but notice that at the Refuge, it became a huge trigger word. You know, was this the command post? Was that the lookout tower? Who was up in the lookout tower? Who was doing guard duty? And then when we sit and listen to these people who shoot individuals and can't even remember if they fired their shots, they can use terms like AR-15 and command post and security. All of a sudden, it's supposedly safe. Did you report that you shot? That you shot? Yes, initially I told Pollard. Then Major Hampton arrived. I discussed with him. He's the next supervisor. Did you disclose the shooting at the bumper? Yes. Did you disclose shooting Mr. Finicum? Yes. So at this point, the prosecution is trying to establish that Officer 1 has been transparent and open, and so there's no reason that he would have fired shots 4 and 5. But there is still reason that he would conceal that, because those shots may not have been considered justified. Where did you leave your weapon? Major Hampton directed me to leave it in my vehicle. Was it locked? No. Who was in charge of the scene? It's a combination, Oregon State Patrol and FBI. Did you see shell casings? No. Did you look for shell casings? No. What did you do at the command post? Remember, command post is now not scary because it's about the elite. I just waited. I had food. I had coffee. I waited for a plan to leave Burns and go to the Deschutes County Sheriff's Department. What did you do there? Deschutes County Sheriff's Department I turned in all items. So then this is where they show us the bag over his face. So we just saw Agent 1 says that he had threats from the militia, that they were coming, and he put a bag over his face. So you always have to ask yourself, when people are hiding, why are they hiding? Okay, I'm going to try to go super fast. I'm kind of going fast. Okay, multiple police pictures. He showed the 2 magazines in his left pocket for his AR-15, also known as an assault rifle when it's in the hands of a militia member. Each clip or magazine could hold up to 30 rounds. He had a pistol on his hip, handcuffs, flashlight. But he only loads them. He only loads them to 29, and this became a big deal because when they actually recovered all of his magazines, they were trying to count them to see how many were missing. Well, he had 24, and he said, well, I still only fired the 3, 4, 5 shots because I only load my magazine to 29, not to 30. And if he had actually loaded it to 31, then he would have discharged he would have discharged a 3 at the grill, 2 at Lavoie's, at the at the roof of the truck, and then 2 into Lavoie. But he says no, it's not possible because he only loads it to 29, and his clip doesn't hold a 31; it only holds 30. We later learned from a forensic evidence expert or whatever that they said his clip actually could have held 31 if he had wanted to.
But there was discussion about how the old timers who used to use AR-15 mags or steel could make it,
but it would make it jam, right, if he had loaded it to 31. So he's 31. It could have, he could have stuffed it up to 31, but he's saying no. I only put 29, which is why I have 24 left. So if you do the math, that means that he couldn't have it if he only had 20. If he only had started with 29. So this whole 29 got to be such a big deal. We spent hours on how he loads his clip. They had him go out with the magazine and actually load the bullets into it, and then unload it and count them one at a time to prove that there was only 29 and that he knew where it was at when it hit 29. They asked him, have you seen the video of Shauna at this point when you went back? Let's see. Well, I don't know when this was. Had you seen the video Shauna made? No. He says, before his first interview, that he had seen the aerial footage on Good Morning America, but he had not seen Shauna's video when he gave his first interview. Did you take the shot that hit the roof? And he says at this point in the interview, no, I did not, or this point in the testimony. I have no recollection of firing at that point or at that angle. Did you think it was you who fired? This is where it starts to turn. Yes, because no one else admitted to firing, so I was running it through my head for days. I didn't know how many rounds I fired, but I never thought that an FBI agent would not report his shots. I never thought I did it, but I thought it didn't make sense. When did you conclude what happened? When all of my rounds, Officer 1 says, when all of my rounds were accounted for, then I concluded. I would have only been able to fire 5 rounds total. I started with 29 bullets. I ended with 24. I fired 3 at the front of Lavoie's truck and 2 at Lavoie, which means I couldn't have shot those. He couldn't have unless he loaded his magazine to 31 that day. Then he could have. There's your reasonable doubt for the jury. Okay. He says at this point, when he concluded that 5 rounds was all that was missing, he says that he testified in his interview, the FBI has a big effing problem. Let's see. OSP at this point, with the prosecution interviewing him, he came across very honest. The police, the Oregon State Patrol, they know how to be on the witness stand. They know how to work the jury. They had the jury laughing. The jury was nodding their heads through most of their testimony. It didn't matter which direction the question was coming from. They would look the opposite way and answer to the jury. And as they did that, the jury was constantly engaging with them and nodding their head or smiling or looking puzzled or looking concerned. So Oregon State Patrol, that good old blue line, innocent or not, they know how to work the jury. All officers today who took the stand, all 3, knew how to work the jury. Let's see here. He kept calling it an operation. That night, how certain were you it was not you who shot at the roof of the truck? That night, I was 100% until he learned about that there were more shots, and then he started to question himself. My observation at this point, he's calm, he's believable, he's trustworthy in appearance and story. The jury is liking the assassin. Cross-examination by the defense, 11:15 a.m. Let's see. Is it true from the time the truck arrived until you fired at Mr. Finicum, you were moving? And he says, yes. Images were blurry, correct? Yes. Your memory is no more precise than the blurry videos, correct? And he kind of paused for a minute, and then he finally said, yes, correct. You don't have a memory how many feet or inches you were to other law enforcement or to other road features, correct? And he says, correct. Let's see, you were startled by a loud sound to the right. Yes. Could it have been gunshots? Yes. As a police officer, do you know the importance of being candid? Yes. He says, I've answered all questions honestly. And he says, so you didn't hold anything back, correct? And then the defense says, is it true that in the 28 months you never disclosed the loud sounds you heard over to the right? He says, that's not correct. I did disclose it to the OIG investigators. Did you disclose it prior to meeting with the OIG? No. And some time had passed before he met with OIG. I noted that, let's see here, I don't know, the whole scene was just, it was just way too laid back. It was a front room atmosphere. It wasn't aggressive. Nobody was standing up. It was like they were all on coffee breaks. Okay, you said you never knew of any other shots fired, correct? Correct. By 2:12, you learned of the unclaimed shots. Yes. You recognized the importance of giving all accurate testimony each time again in early March, OIG and Deschutes County, and you discussed the round fired by Finicum's truck. Yes, I did. And yet you didn't recall the loud sound. Leading. No. Oh, there was so much leading. There were so many objectable things being said. It was literally like everybody was asleep with Judge Jones. I don't know if he put a trance on them or something because he was tired, but you know, like when you yawn and you make other people in the room yawn. But everybody was asleep on the job. Let's see. The first time was in a meeting just last month on June 19th. No. Okay, and then he goes back. The prosecutors are trying to discredit Officer 1 to show that he had reasons to try to hide if he was the shooter. Here's where you said you may have heard gunshots. Yes. Okay, well, that's 2.5 years after the event. Correct. SWAT team is called out. They start asking him his history. SWAT team is called out approximately 50 calls per year. Officer 1 goes out on approximately 1 per year. Yes, I attend most of all of these. Here's all my SWAT training: 42 hours in 2017, 55 hours in 16, 64 hours in 15, 34 hours in 2014. Let's see, your role in planning, what was it? And he says it was in communications with the FBI leader, HRT. Mike Ferrari was the HRT leader. You were planning on January 15th. So this I noticed. So all these different times, there was different points where the occupiers felt like they were really making some headway in what they were doing. On January 15th, they were planning with the HRT to do some type of a ambush or roadblock on them. And then they said on 121, Ward and Ferrari were with you. You guys discussed a roadblock. He says a few days prior is Scott Ward. He says a few days prior is when we learned they'd be on that road. So it was only a few days prior we discussed that roadblock. And the defense is trying to discredit him because he discussed the roadblock at another time, but it was a totally different roadblock they were talking about doing. So he says, you reported to Hampton and were waiting on Ward to set up the roadblock. And there was going to be 6 of your guys, 10 HRT. And he says, Officer 1 says that was a totally different operation. It was not on highway, it was not the Highway 395 roadblock. We just learned about that a few days prior from Mark McConnell, their federal snitch, informant, pretend, militia, border patrol, slime ball. Okay, I presented it, he says, Officer 1 says, I presented it solely for approval to the FBI, the roadblock that they did do. The plan had me more in a communication role. Were you monitoring the radio traffic? And remember, this is the defense cross-examining him. He says, yes. You heard Mr. Finicum was fleeing? Yes. You also heard the officers were chasing Finicum and got out of your truck with your rifle? Yes. You had a contingency plan to jump into the snow if he tried to run the roadblock? He says, yes. He says, but you didn't jump into the snow. You aimed at the driver. Did you identify Finicum? I could not see it was Finicum in the truck, but I was told who was in the truck. I didn't know who they were or where they were sitting. You didn't know where they were in the chase vehicle? And he says, correct. And then the defense says, Oregon State Patrol has a deadly force policy, right? Yes. Firing at a moving vehicle is considered using deadly force. Yes? He says, yes. He says, I fired into the truck when it was front of me only. Then he reads transcripts. Officer 1 explained he continued to aim and shoot at the driver as it swerved into the snow. He says, defense says, you couldn't recall how many shots you took? No. Why? Based on the training, it's oftentimes in a dynamic situation, you won't remember exactly how many shots you fire. And then let's see, defense says, you told the detectives on January 31st you saw Mr. Finicum exit the truck. Yes, at that time I saw him exit the truck. But here you testified, defense says, I saw Finicum exiting the truck and perceived him to be a threat, the greatest threat. Tell the jury about your safety. He explains that he took his rifle he disengaged it from safety when he heard that Mr. Finicum was fleeing and he saw the vehicle approaching him. And then he says, but on 6/19, you interviewed that you took the rifle off of safety as soon as he fled the first stop. Now they were just going back and forth. Did he take the safety off when he heard he fled or when he actually arrived, which I think was the difference of, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. After lunch, different attorney. They're still going back and forth. You were still concerned the militia may have been on their way to the scene? Yes. I don't know, maybe because he just murdered somebody. I don't know. If you hear your friends were just gunned down in the snow, it might be a constitutional thing that you might go. I don't believe anybody was headed there, but anyway, that was a concern. Let's see. He said, because you'd been in a previous shooting, you had a buddy officer, is that correct? Yes. And if you put your AR-15 assault rifle, oh wait, it's just an AR-15 now, in the vehicle that was unlocked overnight, yes. You can see we're like kind of going in circles here. You never completed a report after the shooting, correct. You know there would be consequences and it would be detrimental if you were a part of a wrongful shooting, correct? And he says yes. And then the defense says to Officer 1, the assassin, Hampton texted you saying he had more information about the investigation. I don't recall. So they're trying to show that the other officers were helping him cover up the fact that he did fire shots 4 and 5. I don't recall. I was getting a lot of texts. Did you talk to him? I don't recall. I assume I did. I assume I ended up talking to him by the end of the day. I don't recall. I assume I did. Defense, didn't you text Trooper Pollard later saying, I was on the phone with Hampton, everything is shaping up for a quick resolution? And he says, I don't know. And then he says, didn't you get updates from Hampton? Many officers, he says you were getting updates that many officers thought Joey fired. That's Pollard, right? Pollard. Joey Pollard is the one that was in the tree line.
Astarita is also named Joe, but not Joe.
Okay, Joe and Joey is, okay. At this point, his little hands are shaking. He took a drink of water, and it was like, and I thought, ooh, they're rattling his cage. Maybe he did fire these shots. Okay. Let's see. All is cleared up now. Didn't you get more updates about it? Did you tell Pollard you could have taken the shot? Officer 1, did you tell Pollard, the man in the tree line, it could have been you? No, I said it was possible because I couldn't figure out who else would have done it. See this list? Your rifle wasn't on this list, was it? It wasn't surrendered. Yes, it was surrendered. It was surrendered to my vehicle. The unlocked truck? Yes. You did not count those bullets? No. Are you aware the forensics review came back that your rifle could have held the 31 shots? I don't dispute the report, is what he said. He reported 2 weeks after, I don't recall moving and shooting. You didn't admit that you were concerned with being sued if you fired 4 and 5? Yes, I did admit that. It would have been life-changing. I would have had to reconsider if I could remain in this profession if I had shot 4 and 5. And I'll pause for just a quick second, and then I think I'm getting closer. It was kind of nice to see an officer on the stand getting frazzled, because you got to remember 99% of the time these officers are involved in trials with people they've arrested, and just about every time it leads to a conviction. And so when you get to see
Blue ISIS in action.
when you get to see Blue ISIS sitting on the stand, shaking to take a drink, as he's talking about 50 SWAT calls a year in between his regular, work that he does with OSP, and he's realizing, I think at this moment, like, holy crap, they're taking my every word into account, and he's saying, no, I didn't say that, and they're like, oh, turn to this page, please, Officer 1, and then read that for me, and okay, I guess I did say that. I guess I said it was possible that I was the one who fired the shots. It did feel a little bit good just to see. If there's nothing else I got out of this trial so far, it's just nice to see these officers realizing or sitting in the seats that they put thousands of people in every year. Let's see, I noted these are well-trained officers. They know how to talk to the jury. Note, no objections. They get to freely speak. Everybody's talking like it's a family meeting. Nobody's interrupting. Nobody's being cut off. So you got to remember, with the 2 Bundy trials in Oregon and then the 3 in Nevada, they could hardly get a word in edgewise. And these guys are just talking and going on, and it actually made it really boring, because I'm used to objection, leading, objection, hearsay, objection, whatever the other things they say objection to. And everything has been agreed to ahead of time. This is a script that they're going through, and this is a mock $1 million+ trial. Okay, so they went on and on about what he calls, who he calls what. Jones interrupts, aren't we a little far off? This isn't about a search warrant, because they start asking about search warrants. I noted this is basically Officer 1 against the FBI. All officers are caught with their hands in the cookie jar, and they're all blaming each other. Let's see, where were you when you took your safety off? He says, yeah, it was Deschutes County that actually caught this and actually brought it to the point where they needed to do what they're doing today, or nothing would be happening today. Nobody would be asking questions about the shots. All the shots were already determined to be justified. And so Gina's shots 1, 2, and 3 were when the vehicle was moving towards him, and they said that was justifiable to have the vehicle moving towards him. They was trying to stop a threat. And then the last 3 from OSP 1 and 2, Lavoie wasn't following commands. It was 4 and 5 when he simply jumped out of the vehicle that they could have shot him. And they could have shot Victoria, they could have shot Ryan. Those are the ones that are in question. And from what Officer 1 said, he is concerned that he would have gotten sued if he had taken those shots. Because the vehicle had stopped. Lavoie had just jumped out of the car. He didn't even have time to surrender. He could have been literally jumping out of the car saying, I surrender. And it wouldn't matter, because as soon as he jumped out, the shots were fired and he would be dead. So that's why 4 and 5 are such a big deal. Okay, where were you when you took your safety off? I saw the truck approaching. I would have never fired. Let's see, and I knew I would need to fire to stop the truck. And then I noted, what if you shot Lavoie at that point? Vehicle going 80 miles an hour, probably not very smart. Police can fire and not know how many rounds you fired, but if you as a civilian do this, they're coming for you. Explain the context when you saw that it was possible you might have fired. He says, at that point, I had little info. I was trying to come up with a different theory. I didn't believe that I did it, but I didn't believe any other agent on the scene would fire his weapon and not report it. So I started wondering if I fired those shots. Please load this magazine for me, the jury, and for the jury. 29 rounds he loaded. Is this how you load it every time? Yes. Now count them out for us one at a time. Officer 1 then leaves the stand. He left. They made a big deal. They paused. Wait, we've got to decide what we're doing. He goes out through the jury's door, and all the other witnesses have been going out through the front. So, definitely painting this picture like his life is severely in jeopardy if he walks out through the witnesses, right? Because all of us moms are going to, mob him or something with marshals everywhere? Come on. So that was kind of upsetting. Next witness was a bomb tech, Officer Zach Nichols. He's been with OSP since 2008, Criminal Division, Detective, Bend, Oregon, SWAT since 2013. Who had the overall command of the FBI? Prosecution asked him. who had the overall command? And he answers the FBI. Others have answered that it was joint. He answered the FBI. How many people did you intend to arrest? Officer Nichols intended to arrest 6. Did you believe them to be armed and dangerous with those assault rifles? I mean, AR-15s. Oh wait, we're talking about the militia again, so they'd be assault rifles. Yes, I believe them to be armed and dangerous. What were you driving? Who was with you? He was with a couple HRT officers. Was there air support as well? He says, yes, they had air support. So I assume air support could have intervened at any time if they needed. And I would assume that would mean that they were armed too if he said that they had air support. What happened when you tried to stop them? The Jeep stopped easily. So note to self, if you're going to try to ambush somebody, just have a federal informant that works for you be driving, and it's going to probably stop easily, because even if the passengers are terrified, they're going to be screwed and they'll have to stop too. Thank you, Mark McConnell. Jeep stopped. White Dodge was about a mile ahead of the Jeep. He listed off, there was Officer Olson, Oregon State Patrol with him. There was a K-9 unit, FBI, and HRT with this officer. What happened? He says, I told Mr. Finicum to exit the vehicle. He responded that no, he was going to see the sheriff. So this man, Officer Nichols, is the driver that had Officer 2 in it. They then followed the vehicle, followed Lavoie. Officer 2 jumped out and fired 1 shot, killing Lavoie. At the same time, the Officer 1 was already on the ground and fired 2 shots. So he says, I told him he wouldn't exit. He said he was going to Grant County to see the sheriff. He said we'd have to shoot him. We planned to do a gas plan after Ryan Payne exited the vehicle. They asked him if they had to fire any non-lethal rounds, and he said no. Whoops, because they did fire 1 non-lethal round that hit the mirror. They said they hit yesterday. One of the officers, Friday, said they actually hit Ryan Payne in the hand. We've always heard the testimony from Ryan that they hit the mirror, but I'm not quite sure. So he said we were about to initiate a gas launcher. We were waiting for it to arrive. So apparently we have vehicles that are gas launchers. Finicum then drove off. Officer 2 radioed ahead. Finicum was going about 80 miles an hour. We were having a hard time keeping up. I came around the corner and then I could see the roadblock. I had to write that down because they at first made it sound like Lavoie was going to try to ram the roadblock or injure the neater that jumped in front of the vehicle. None of that was the case. Even the second vehicle said they came around the corner and then could see the roadblock. He said he did see brake lights come on for just a second, and then Lavoie sped up, which the other officers testified that they never heard any acceleration or deceleration. I saw him then get stuck in the snow, doors open, Finicum gets out with his hands in the air. They said his hands were up. Yes, his hands were up. It looked like he stumbled, and so his hands briefly came down. Okay, that might have been the only truth this officer told the entire time he was on the stand. Well, no, he was being honest, but still. The fact that he finally said something that nobody will admit to, and that is that when he brought his hands down, it was because he was stumbling in the snow. He says, I did then see him reach with his right hand into his jacket to grab his pistol. I knew he had a gun because I saw it on YouTube. I'm not kidding you guys, that's what he said. He said, I knew he had a gun because I saw it on YouTube. When he said that, I thought, don't laugh, you can't laugh. And I was told he was armed. Now, this agent admitted that he was going to shoot Lavoie when he saw him reaching, but Officer 1 and 2 had already taken him down. So just think about that. I saw him reach into his jacket. He was going to grab a gun. How did you know he was armed? I saw it on YouTube. Like, really? He was going to shoot Lavoie because he saw it on YouTube. Third world justice, guys. Third world justice. He says, I was disengaging my safety to prepare to shoot Mr. Finicum. I was concerned about Officer Pollard in the trees. Remember, Officer Pollard had the long taser in front of him. And then he says, and I did notice a .308 caliber casing in the snow in the road. When did you see that casing? And that would have been from Officer 2. That became a big deal because that casing went missing, and it's one of the only ones that people are able to testify that they did see it there, and then later when the detectives came to collect it, it was gone. Now, Officer 2 would have been the one who fired that, and he's not denying he fired it, so it's not a big deal like there was a casing in the road that belongs to the other, the shots that hit the roof. But it is a big deal because the casing was gone later when the detectives looked for it. Okay, after all the occupants were removed, I saw it there. Then we have, oh wait, is this still Zach and Detective David Armstrong? Were those what detectives with him? Why did I write down Zach? Oh, they were the investigators who came to the scene, and they were walking around with Detective Meckham. It was Meckham. And they went looking for the shell casing, and they went looking for the shell casing together, but it was gone. And this is one of the objections that just really made me laugh. He says, it was out in the road, had vehicles come through? And he said, yes, we did let some civilians come through, not fast, it was very slow. And then the prosecutor said, was this prosecutor or defense? Prosecutor said, did you not, he says, so do you think that it got taken up with the cars? And he says, no. And he says, is that because the casing would have been too big to fit in the tire? And the defense says, objection, leading. And Judge Jones says, that's not leading. I was like, yes, it is. Not that it matters, but it absolutely was leading. The prosecution straight up said, were you not worried about the cars because you thought the bullet was too big and it wouldn't fit in the tires? That's leading. Instead of asking the question, why were you not worried about the cars coming through, is how it should have been worded. But at any rate, it didn't matter anyway. So let's see, at that point there was Agent Olson, another name I didn't get, and Jeremiah is something I didn't get. He then says he left with Agent Pollard. Number 2 left with Officer 2 left with Trooper Jeff Aldred. Any other casing seen? Only a 40, I think it was milliliter or something. I don't know guns. So 40 something that would have been a non-lethal shot. He said it's very different than a .308. At this point, there were 5 to 6 HRT members still there. They were making a plan to get a trooper up the road in case the public came from Burns, because when you murder people in the snow and then you leave them there for hours, you should probably worry that people might come to figure out what's going on. They asked if there was anything they saw with the HRT, and was anybody walking around? And this agent, I already forgot his name that I'm talking about, Zach. I have to look. So, Zach Nichols, who was the driver for Officer 2. He was the driver at the first stop. If he saw anything, and he says, yes, there was a private meeting happening with 3 HRT members who didn't want to be heard. He walked by them, and he said they were very clearly standing around having a private meeting. So again, it's pointing that, attention to the HRT, our hostage rescue team, our FBI, the elite of the elite, are standing around talking about something. Casings go missing, and here we are at this mock trial that won't result in true justice anyway. Casing was to the right, cross-examination. He looks at the jury with every question. This Zach, I just forgot his name again, I'm really tired. Zach Nichols is also very sly, much like Pollard and Officer 1. We don't get to know his name. Remember, when you kill people, you get to keep your identity secret, kind of like, ISIS. They cover up their faces so that when they murder people, you don't know who they are. In the United States, we just use paper packs. I don't know. But
ISIS uses paper sacks.
Yeah, we use paper sacks. Redirect. Were you not concerned with the vehicle picking up the casings? Oh, I already wrote that twice. Objection, leading. Jones. No, it's not leading. And I wrote laugh out loud. Okay, meeting with the detectives on January 29th in an officer-involved shooting. You have a legal rep and a union rep. And I just thought that was funny because I thought, You know, when Daryl Thorne got arrested, I don't think he had a union rep and legal rep sitting there with him when he was being harassed, or Jeff Stanek, or Ammon Bundy, or any of the rest of them. And I just thought, isn't that funny? You get accused of firing your weapon and killing somebody, and you don't have to talk to anybody. In fact, for days, January 29th, you know, I know you just murdered somebody, so just take it easy for a few days. Don't talk to anybody. And we'll get you an attorney and a union rep to make sure that we get you out of this. Contrary to the civilian, when they are accused, they get taken into rooms alone and threatened to never see their family again. Okay, I'll try to wrap this up, guys. OSP Sergeant Joey Pollard. Oh, I've been talking a lot about Pollard. I haven't even gotten to Pollard yet. He's the last one. 23 years with Oregon State Patrol, State Police, SWAT team, sergeant for 1 year, sniper SWAT team the rest of the time. Did you meet with the command post? Remember, command post isn't scary right now because we're dealing with uniforms. The command post was the middle school in Burns. They actually took over a middle school. They took over a middle school, you guys.
Just like ISIS does in the Middle East.
Oh my gosh.
ISIS does in the U.S.
You're being such a provocateur. I was in communication with all of those at the roadblock. What was the less lethal device that you had? So Pollard's the guy in the trees. He said, I had a taser. Who chose the location of the roadblock? And he says, Agent BM made the final decision of where. I rode with Agent Astarita to the site. There was aerial surveillance updating us at the location of the drivers, and then also Mark McConnell, but it sounds like Mark McConnell didn't do a good job because he didn't actually tell them that there was an 18-year-old girl in the car. Imagine that. Did you communicate with others at the stop? Pollard answers, Officer 2 radioed to us, because Pollard is on the ground in the trees, and then he's close to Agent 1. He's not in the trees yet. He hasn't seen Lavoie. He's over there close to Astarita and BM and Officer 1, who is the killer. He radioed to us, traffic stop has been initiated. The occupants in Finicum's truck were not cooperative. And then they asked, did you ever say OSP will have to shoot him? And Pollard answers, no, I never heard them say that. So there's two sides. The defense wants you to believe, the defense for Astarita wants you to believe that Officer 1 and 2 were radioing to each other, you're going to have to shoot Lavoie. So that shows that motive that they would have been firing right when he jumped out of the car. The prosecution is saying, no, what they said was, Lavoie said you're going to have to shoot me, and therefore the Officer 1 and 2, who were the shooters, the killers, were not all ramped up ready to kill him. They were just simply quoting Lavoie. I don't know if Andrea's on here, but I hope I'm doing good, Chica. Okay, so between Officer 1 and 2, they were talking about initiating a gas plan, then Finicum sped away. This is much of like the last testimony of Zach. I already forgot his name again.
Zach
Nichols. Yeah. Finicum sped away, and then Pollard says, I moved towards the tree line through the snow. He says, it wasn't wise to stay in the road with the truck approaching. It would have been hazardous. I heard multiple rounds of gunshot fired as I was moving about 20 yards up in the snow towards the tree line. So that would have been when psychopath Officer 1 is firing into the grill of the vehicle, possibly murdering an 18-year-old girl who's there to sing for a choir. At this point, Officer Pollard is running up into the tree line with his taser to get himself out of a hazardous situation and not have to murder anybody. So hats off to Oregon State Patrol Officer Pollard for not being a psychopath. Not that he isn't the rest of the time, I don't know. But at this point, he was not being a psychopath. Did you see his hands in the air? Officer Pollard says yes. Anything in his hands? No. Did you hear something? Yes. What? A gunshot? Then what? Officer Pollard says he stepped towards me in the snow. Finicum had his hands up. He walked towards me. I repeated the commands to stop and get down on the ground. I had a .40 caliber pistol out pointed at Finicum, but I saw Officer 1 across from us with the lethal force pointed at us, so at Finicum, so I knew I could put away my pistol and I could draw my taser and attempt to use non-lethal force on Finicum. Well, color me happy. Isn't that a wise idea? Isn't that a wise idea? Now, if only the other psychopaths had not fired, Pollard probably could have just tased Lavoie, and nobody would have had to die. He might have even then had a nice conversation with the guy after he was done tasing him. Mock trial. No one is standing for any questions. Everybody's sitting down. This is an absolute joke. Did you talk to Officer 2 after the shooting? Pollard says, yes, I took pictures. Officer 2 brought attention to the 308 casing in the road. Wait, I took pictures. What did he say he took pictures of? Did you talk to Officer 2 after the shooting? Yes, I took pictures. He didn't take pictures. Oh, he was taking pictures down in the road, but he didn't take any pictures of the casing that he said he was standing on. He says, I was the companion officer to Officer 1, the assassin. He placed his AR, also known as an assault rifle, unless you're Oregon State Patrol, and then it is an AR-15. So you guys got to get your jargon correctly here. He placed his AR, not to be confused with an assault rifle, in his vehicle. Did you leave with Officer 1? Officer Pollard, the guy in the tree, says yes. About 30 minutes before it got dark, we left. Major Hampton drove us to the first command post. Remember, command post is now not scary because it's Oregon State Patrol who kill people. So Major Hampton drove us away to the command post about 30 minutes away. Does that sound right? Was Deschutes only 30 minutes away, or maybe in 30 minutes? Pollard then took Officer 1 and 2 home to their residence. That was really sweet of Officer Pollard. 1 and 2 just killed somebody, and they get to go home to their family because they had their little blue line badge. Did you have a conversation with Astarita? And he says, yes, 2 to 3 days after the shooting, Astarita was holding, and he said he saw Astarita, and Astarita comes up and is holding an AR, not an assault rifle, remember, but an AR-15 magazine that he said he found on the ground at the scene. And he asked if it was Oregon State Patrol's. Pollard said, no, we don't use metal magazines. And he doesn't recall if he took it or not. I thought that was funny because I thought, why wouldn't you turn it in as evidence? Why would Astarita collect it, wait 2 to 3 days, then see the Oregon State Patrol officer who killed Lavoie? Oh, no, it wasn't. I'm sorry. Then see the Pollard, who was in the tree line, and say, hey, is this your magazine? We found it in the snow. They did ask if it is common, I think I'm on the last page, if it is common to find a magazine in the snow, on the ground in a situation like this. And he said, it's not uncommon. Cross of Pollard, taser man, is what I noted him to be. Officer 2 called on the radio. He wasn't going to comply. Okay, so cross-examination now from the defense, and they want to clarify. Officer 2 called on the radio and said what? And he said he wasn't going to comply. I'm getting tired. Defense asked him, did Officer 2 call on the radio and say he wasn't going to comply, we're going to have to shoot him? And he says no. Slowing it down, you see Lavoie, side note, is already veering off the road before the agent jumps in front of the snow. Okay, now maybe I'm on the last one. This is the last one. These are just recap notes again. They go to trial often completely rehearsed. They're polished. OSP knows how to present themselves to the jury. It's a mock trial. There's virtually no objections, maybe 1 or 2. It's like there's no fight, no goal. Everybody's there to freely talk because they're all getting paid a buttload of money, so why rush this thing along? Second Amendment, it's for the officers and the elite to brag about only. Second Amendment is not for self-defense. It is not for protecting yourself against your government if they become tyrannical. Whether they're wearing a uniform or not, if they try to kill you. Second Amendment is not for that from our government's perspective. They believe that they can brag about their guns and their bullets, and they're completely protected because they are the elite. Command posts are for the elite only. Officers say that Lavoie reached multiple times for his pistol, but my observation is they plan to kill him from the first set of 3 shots that were fired in the road. Pollard got to examine and photograph Lavoie's truck when Jeanette and the other attorneys cannot. That bugged me. This is FBI versus OSP. Everybody's trying to get out of it, and at the end, nobody will be held accountable. Judge looks like a corpse, white, pale, thin, and grouchy, was another note. I'm just reading it, guys. And I noted this is bizarre because there was some really bizarre points. Sorry, I'm making it dark. And that is nearly an entire packet of notes that I just read you. So that is my recap of the trial. I tried to take very thorough notes of it. I'm trying to think if there was anything else that stuck out to me. I think one thing is, and then I'll wrap this up. We have become a country that believes that the laws are more important than life. And so when these officers, I really didn't feel the satanic oppressive feeling that I anticipated that I would feel, like I did at times through the other trials. You know, they definitely were deceptive, but at the end of the day, I really felt like these guys are really just doing their job. And they are told that their job is to execute the law. It's to uphold the law and defend the law, whatever the law is. And so for them, this wasn't some personal, vendetta against Lavoie. Although after 26 days, I guess in Burns, you could say it maybe became personal. But for them, at the end of the day, their job was just to make this thing end. That's it. Make this end, get all the people home, empty the refuge, and let's move on to the next mission. And so I think part of our problem is that some of us who love liberty and freedom, that we think we're living in a country that loves liberty and freedom, and we're not. We're living in a country that loves laws. And if you don't follow the law, they will kill you. They'll kill you. They killed Lavoie because he didn't follow the law, not because he was a threat to anybody, but because he didn't follow the law. They can have command posts, they can occupy federal buildings, they can kick kids out of the building, they can harass the public, they can go to Dwayne Schrock's house and intimidate and threaten him, trying to get him to remember that there were more people armed during the day than there really were. And that's completely okay, because whatever they have to do to uphold the law is considered reasonable at the end of the day. And so, I don't know, I think we've got a clash of two worlds here, where some people, really want to defend and uphold the Constitution, and they don't quite understand the giant that is in front of them. And the giant is the giant that can, take over other countries and is one of the most elite governments in the world. And then us little people try to stand up and say, but it's my constitutional right. Well, when you're a nation of laws, there is no constitutional right. What does the law say? The law says you stop or they kill you. That's it. The law says if you protest on public property after they've told you to leave, whether you're protesting ICE or you're protesting the BLM or you're protesting your governor or whoever it is, if they tell you to get out of the public area and you don't, then they'll kill you. So this whole idea that we have a constitutionally protected right is pretty far out the door, because if we really, really had and defended that right, then they would never be able to tell you when your protest is over. Your protest would always be protected under the First Amendment. You'd always have the right to protest your government. Otherwise, the government can always oppress the people and tell them when their time is up. And so anyway, I think we've got some major clashing of worlds, and I think people need to understand, if you don't do what they tell you, they'll kill you. And they'll pat each other on the back on the way out the door to collect their donuts at the next shop. So anyway, I hope that was a good update, and I hope you guys took something away from it. I'm tired. Jeanette was strong. I can't believe she's sitting in this trial, to be honest. And she's to sit in there, and it's just a whole different trial. It's so different than the last two in Oregon, but she's being courageous. So please support her and show up if you guys can. Let's keep filling that courtroom, and keep letting them know that some of us are watching, and those of us who are watching are going to speak out. That's all we have left we can do. All right, I think that's all. God bless.